Hello, boils and ghouls. Welcome back to the Horror After Dark podcast in the sack with JT, and we got a obscure Spanish-German co-production slasher film here, Bloody Moon from 1981. One of those real cheesy, low-budget, early 80s slasher films. But the highlight of this movie is the kills. There are some really, really good kills in this movie. One in particular that is great. So, if anyone hasn't seen this one, quick Tubi synopsis. Young women are hunted and killed at a language school in Spain while a psychotic killer gains power and momentum. It's directed by Jesús Franco, and Olivia Pascal is the lead role here. That name sounds very, very familiar, so I probably have seen her in something else. But without further ado, let's dive into Bloody Moon from 1981. A few things I really like about this movie, too, even though the acting and the dialogue is very bad. It's very cringeworthy at times. We have this party with, of course, disco music playing, and we see a couple start to fuck. Then we see this disfigured guy, Miguel. And if I remember right, there's some weird incest stuff with him and his sister later on in the movie, but we'll get there. This disfigured guy, Miguel, ends up stealing the mask from one of the partygoers that's having sex with somebody else, and goes and starts dancing and flirting with this other chick. Now, side note, everyone was waiting for Mickey Mouse horror movies and stuff when it went public domain, Steamboat Willie, earlier this year. You could argue that the mask this guy's wearing is just a mouse, but I know Mickey Mouse when I see him, and that's a fucking Mickey Mouse mask. That's hard to say, but it's definitely Mickey Mouse, so they didn't have any rights issues, I guess, back then in 81 with Bloody Moon. But he ends up going back to this girl's place, and we get some tits, but it's not that great because of the context where we find out when she pulls the mask off of him and finds out it's not the guy she thought it was. It's the disfigured dude. They get into a little struggle, and then he takes these scissors and starts stabbing her in the stomach with it, and the effects look great. The kill is great, and then it just opens on her face with the Spanish title, which is Diez des Todes, which translates roughly to The Saw of Death, which references the best kill in this movie. I love how sleazy this movie feels. I love some of the shots in this movie. They look really good. The lighting looks really good. The score and the weird sound cues that play during kill scenes, that's really cool too. And it just has a creepy atmosphere to it. And I think the low budget really adds to it. So after that brutal opening kill, Miguel ends up being incarcerated in a psychiatric hospital for 5 years and is released after just 5 years for brutally stabbing this woman to death. Is released into the care of his sister Manuela. And the makeup on Miguel's face that makes him all deformed, fucked up in the face looking, it looks good. And then they're on a train leaving the sanitarium, and he ends up seeing Olivia Pascal's character, Angela, on this train, and immediately becomes infatuated with her. And his sister Manuela thinks that he killed her. Like, this is like right after he got released from this mental institution, and she's hoping that he gets better and that he is better. And the first thing she thinks when they look into, like, because it's one of those trains with the cabins that you can go into, so it's Angela's cabin, and they see her, and then she asks Miguel, why are you looking at her like that? And then they look in the room, and she's gone, and the window's open. So she's thinking that he pushed her out the window of the train and says, you didn't kill her, right? And then she was like behind the door or something. She comes out and explains herself when she doesn't have to. It's pretty funny. So Manuela opens up a language boarding school. I'm pretty sure it's just for girls. I could be misremembering. I'm pretty sure it is, though. But her aunt is a old bitch, and she's a countess, and she owns the property, the school, and really, really cool exterior shots. The whole school looks really, really cool. There's a lot of cool shots and camera work in this movie for such a low-budgeted slasher film. So she owns everything, the Countess, and if this was an Italian horror movie, as a Countess, she would immediately be the killer. But she's not in this movie. And she thinks Manuela is just waiting for her to die so she can get all of her money. And for a film called Bloody Moon, we do get multiple shots of the moon in the sky. This is the third one I've seen. We're only 20 minutes into this movie. Luckily, the old bitch Countess isn't in the movie for long. She's the next kill. And it's not great, but it's pretty brutal. The killer walks in, you don't see the killer at all. And she's laying in bed. I think she's paralyzed or something. She's in a wheelchair. So she can't get out of bed. And she knows someone is there. And he comes in with a torch and just lights her on fire. She burns to death. And for slasher fans where boobs are important, there are tons of tits all over this movie. Also, about the dubbing in this movie, it's not great. But then again, I'm very used to bad dubbing from a lot of foreign films. So if you're an 80s slasher fan and you check this movie out, I could see the dubbing being kind of distracting, especially mixed with the really bad dialogue at times. But now Angela, the girl from the train that Manuela thought her brother Miguel threw out and murdered right on the spot, she's at this boarding school of language, and it is an old girls' school. The setting is really good in this movie too. Like, this whole boarding house, it's not like when you think of a boarding house in your head. This has a nice big ass pool, there's nice trees, plants, and foliage everywhere. It looks like you're in the Bahamas or something at a resort. Like, it's really nice looking. Oh, that's right. So, as fate would have it, Angela is staying in the same bungalow, which has unlucky number 13 as the number, that Miguel murdered the woman with the scissors at the beginning of this movie. She's got the greatest luck in the world. And Miguel's already stalking her at the bungalow, creeping around. He kind of looks like, not to this extreme decrepit, but he looks kind of like George Eastman in Anthropophagus. Like with the sores and weird disfigurement on the face. That makeup, I don't know, it reminds me of George Eastman a bit. Angela's in her bungalow and she hears noises. She has the shower running for way too long, so there's fog on the mirror and she wipes it off. And you see the decrepit, disturbing face of Miguel in the reflection. And she recognizes him as the guy from the train. Then she goes outside to meet a friend, and he's still walking and stalking after her. But then she runs into her friend for a stupid jump scare, and then the friend says, "What are you so afraid of? You knew I was coming to pick you up. Come on, let's go." And she goes, That's literally her response, And they walk away. Instead of her response being, "Oh, yeah, you scared me because I was just being followed by this creepy-looking dude," it's just, Oh, the 80s. Then there's this random guy, Antonio or some shit, that Angela and her friend see him with two girls, one on each side of him, and they're like, "Hey, wait for us." And apparently this guy has fucked every single woman at this boarding house. Like, everyone starts saying, "Oh, he's a fantastic lover, you should check him out sometime." It's very random, but it's hilarious. So yeah, there's this whole weird ancestral relationship between Miguel and Manuela, his sister. And he shows up at her place, and they kiss, and then try to go further, and she says, "No, we shouldn't start up again." So apparently they've been fucking before in the past, I don't know. And people will never understand or love all that weird crap. So you get a little bit of everything in this movie. This movie also, just like Pieces, has definite giallo vibes to it. That we don't see the killer, and we're led to believe it's Miguel. Now, there's this Professor Alvaro, who is friendly with Manuela. And if I recall correctly, the two of them are the killers. And in the end, they try to kill Miguel. They try to frame murders on Miguel, and then they try to kill him so she can retain all of her inheritance since they already killed the old countess bitch, her aunt. So just the plot alone is very Giallo-esque. But then we get a great kill. Angela's friend Ava comes over to her bungalow and asks for a nightgown, a pullover, and she's going fishing with some dude she met at the club or the disco or whatever, and she goes in the bathroom, titties / September, and then the killer's in the house, and the killer comes up behind her and stabs her through the back, and then you see the knife come out her nipple, like out of her breast. It looks really cool, really awesome effect. And then her body falls onto the bed. Angela comes in, sees it. She's freaking out. And she runs out of the place and runs into Antonio, the walking fuck machine from earlier. And they go in to check it out. It's maybe 60 seconds since the body of Ava collapsed onto the bed. And they go in the bedroom, and there's just a murder mystery novel that she was reading before she fell asleep and then got woken up. And he says that, yeah, you're reading too much of these mystery novels. It's getting to your head. First of all, this killer was able to move this woman's body in 60 seconds or less, and she was stabbed through the back and out her breast. There's gonna be blood, like, at least somewhere, right? There's no blood. There's no sign of anything. It's so ridiculous. So Alvaro, the professor, is banging Manuela, the sister of Miguel. So now it makes more sense. All the weird incest shit. She don't have feelings for him. She's just playing into his weird feelings for her just to, get her scheme underway and get it done. And then frame all these murders on him. So now it makes a little more sense. Because this is a nice scene, and this is where you start to really doubt that Miguel is behind these killings. And I like also how this plays into the setting, that they're at a language school. So they're in class with the professor, and Angela and everybody are listening to headphones that are teaching them another language. Her headset, all of a sudden, the voice starts saying, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to cut you in two like a piece of wood. And then she looks out the window and she sees Miguel creeping out there. And then she freaks out. And then everybody looks at her like she's insane, like anybody would in a situation like this. And of course the professor dismisses it completely and says, I'll just turn the volume up. So Angela ends up going to Antonio Fuck Machine Gardner. His last name's not Gardner, but he is a gardener, for help to try to find Ava, because no one believes her that Ava is dead, that she was murdered, and that this same person's trying to kill Angela as well. And we've seen like 8 shots of the moon so far. Then we get this scene where we see Manuela looking at her pet snake, but there's one missing, and she's asking the snake if Miguel, her brother, has the other one, Medusa. Then we get this random scene when Antonio and Angela are talking, and Medusa, the snake, is on a tree right behind her. So he runs at her. She's thinking he's trying to kill her. He has garden shears, and he just goes up to this snake and slices the snake's head off. And it's terrible, but for 81... maybe it was filmed in 1980, in a Spanish film, that was definitely a real snake. And you see the head of the snake on the ground, still like contracting, like moving. It's really, really insane. So this is a funny scene that has a really cool shot in between the hilarity. Angela now thinks Antonio, the fuck machine, is the murderer. That he had a relationship that lasted like one night with Ava, and she thinks that Ava was killed by him, and now she was just attacked by him in her mind with the garden shears, and he was just trying to protect her from the snake. So she runs into her group of friends, and they say, no, come with us, we're going to see if one of the other girlfriends had a guy come over like she said she was going to. And they go and they're listening, and this girl is in the house, and she's putting on this performance like she's getting fucked, but she's not. And then she goes into the closet for some reason and grabs a hanger or something, and she doesn't see it, but we see the corpse of Ava hanging in the closet, and the knife is still coming out of her breast. It's a really cool shot. It reminds me of Slumber Party Massacre, when the girl opens the fridge and the body hangs out and she doesn't notice and then shuts it. Kind of gave me vibes of that, even though this one did it first. Then all the friends laugh at this girl. Then you get the best scene and best kill in this movie. Inga, one of the other friends, gets in this car with some guy wearing a mask, because you don't see it, but she says when they get to the destination, I still don't know what you look like. Will you take that mask off? So Inga's a little stupid, but she gets in the car with this person, and he only says a few words, but it sounds like a woman, so I think this might be Manuela and not Alvaro. It's Alvaro, right? But regardless, the killer ends up taking her to this shed, and there's a little boy nearby who witnesses what's about to happen, and she thinks this is some kinky sexual thing and is willingly letting herself be tied down by the killer to this stone slab. And then there's a huge circular industrial saw, and she's tied down with a bunch of rope. He goes, the killer, and turns it on, and then she starts moving closer and closer to the saw, and she's screaming her lungs out. And then the boy runs in and shuts it off, but the killer shoves his ass out the way. He goes running and turns it back on. And the first time you see this, when you see the kid shut it off, you're thinking, please don't rob me of what could be an amazing kill. And then it's very quick, and then instantly the kid gets shoved out of the way, and it's back on. And then it just proceeds to cut through her neck and decapitate her. And her head falls onto the floor. There's blood everywhere. And then open neck hole starts squirting and spurting blood out of it. It is an excellent kill. And then the cherry on top is the killer gets in the car and drives down the road, and we see the little boy who tried to stop it running down the road and just plows over him and kills the kid. But that's always a positive. So Laura, Angela's friend, and I guess her only one left, ends up stopping by, and Angela has barricaded herself into her place because Antonio, man-fucker machine, was at one door. She wouldn't let him in. Then she saw Miguel at the window, so she barricaded the whole place. And Laura comes in after Angela proceeds to stab a dummy to death. But then Laura says she's going to go to the club or whatever and see if she can get some alcohol. And she says those famous words, I'll be right back. And she lets her go. I mean, she does come to her senses a minute later, but she's a minute late. She goes like, oh no, Laura, don't. And then she doesn't go out and scream at her or anything to come back. Laura's kill is pretty decent too, even though I always say, like, stranglings don't really do much for me. The killer comes out with this metal, I don't even know, like a metal clamp, and clamps it around her neck and squeezes, and the blood's coming out of her mouth and stuff, strangles her to death. That looks cool. And in traditional slasher fashion, she ends up discovering all the bodies of her friends, and I love how she pulls the sheets back on Inga because she thinks Inga's laying in bed, the one who got her head sawed off, and she pulls the blanket back and it's just her severed head in the bed, and she screams and runs away. That's a great scene. And then she notices shoes behind the curtains, and she opens them, and it's Ava's body stabbed through the tit girl, and she's covered in plastic, and she falls forward. Really cool shots. And then she immediately goes in the next room, and you see Laura hanging from the ceiling, and the ceiling fan going around. And the killer's disguise, like when you do see the killer, it's nothing great. She's dressed in all black with pantyhose, a stocking over the face. That's it. So there's no real cool look of the killer here. But then the killer attacks Angela, and this is when we see Miguel, who was still lurking like a fucking creep, stalking her. And he comes to the rescue and tries to fight the killer, and the killer ends up knocking him out with something, and Angela runs like hell. So Angela ends up running to Manuela and ends up saying that there's a killer after her, all her friends are dead, and of course, because Manuela's in on this, she gives her something to knock her out, gives her a drink. Then the professor ends up coming over, and it was him who did all the murders. She just orchestrated it with him. She says it. And yeah, she doesn't have any feelings for her brother. She hates him. She's just repulsed by him. And while they're having this conversation, Miguel, her brother, ends up walking in and overhearing it, and then he slinks back out. He slunk out. Manuela tells the professor that there's one left you have to take care of, Angela. She's upstairs. Go kill her for me. So Miguel ends up walking into the room Angela's sleeping in and thinks that it's Manuela, his sister, and starts choking her to death. And she grabs something off the table. I don't know what it is. It's long and spiky, shoves it right through his neck, and it goes all the way through to the other side, and he falls down onto the ground. That looks really cool too. Great effects again in this movie. And then a cool shot when Angela goes into a room and she sees the Countess sitting by the fireplace. She walks around and she looks, and it's the old bitch, but she's dead. So it's just like very Psycho-esque, I guess. But she's all decrepit, dead in the chair. Then we have the professor who goes to kill Angela, and Manuela, because they've been arguing, he wants money from her. She ain't giving it up after this whole murder scheme. She takes hedge trimmers and just slices the professor across the chest. He falls to the ground. He's fucking dead. Then she threatens Angela, but she lets her go. She says, remember, my brother and Alvaro, if that's still his name, are both murderers. Never forget that. I saved your life just now. Get out of here. So she leaves, and Antonio shows up with the police, but Manuela ends up going into the room that her brother Miguel is supposedly dead in. And despite being impaled to the neck, he's still alive, and he gets up and he strangles his sister to death and ends up collapsing on top of her and holding her hand in that weird relationship way and feelings that he has for her, and the movie ends. It's a very obscure, lesser-known slasher. It's a very fun movie. The story's not that bad. The acting's not great, but it's better than I remember. And the highlight, of course, is just the kills. A bunch of naked chicks. I mean, what else could you want in a slasher film? So that's Bloody Moon from 1981. Hope everyone's having a great morning, afternoon, or night. I will talk to you soon. Take care, everybody.